Hello, everyone. We'll just give it 30 seconds to allow the participants into this session, and then we'll get started. Hello and welcome. I'm Mike Adams, and I'm the founder and creator of Purple Tuesday and the chief executive of Purple. Welcome to our third session today on global tech trends, practice and innovations. Just before we start, I just want to run through some housekeeping. This session is being recorded and will be shared with you after the event. And it's really important because we know some of you watching live and some of you will be watching it on demand. Captions are enabled. Turn them on in your viewing tab in Zoom if required. And probably the most important thing is get your questions in the Q&A or the chat box. And you have a responsibility to yourself to ask the right questions and ask any questions. And for those, think about those who are watching it on demand and won't get the opportunity to ask the question. Think about what they might ask and please just ask it. I would also like to extend a huge thank you to our headline partner today, eBay. And I'm delighted that Mark Lepole from eBay is joining us and is part of the panel. And our global partners, Standard Chartered Bank, SHL and Hidden Disability Sunflower Scheme, and to all of our national partners shown here. Without their contribution, today's conference would not have been possible. And to be honest, if someone had said to me 4 years ago that I would be hosting a global session focused on tech trends, I would have laughed. I was still using my trusty BlackBerry phone where 3 of the letters no longer work. But I did not want to give it up. And I certainly had never heard of Zoom or Teams. Tech development can be an absolute enabler. It can, as we redefine accessibility, it becomes a huge player for us. But if we're not careful, it can simply create another barrier to accessibility as well. And I'm still startled by the statistic that says that only 3% of the top 1 million websites are compliant with the World Accessibility Standards. And we know that in 2020, £17.1 billion was lost by companies as disabled people left a website before purchasing a product or service due to poor customer service or accessibility. And I know that the figures are comparable elsewhere in the world. And the key message today is that small changes can make a huge difference for those with disabilities. The online world is here to stay. It's part of our lives. And so we need to ensure digital developments remain accessible. And today I am joined by a stellar group of panelists to discuss this very issue. Mark Lepole, Director of Accessibility at eBay, Sarah Gutierrez, Chief Science Officer at SHL, Raghunath Venkappa from Standard Charter. We've got Abby Pearl from GiffGaff, and we have Isaac Harvey, who is our Purple Tuesday Disabled Customer Ambassador. And I'm going to dive straight in with you, Mark, if that is okay with you, and just ask a very, very straightforward question. Why is digital accessibility so important to eBay?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Mike. So accessibility is important for eBay for a few reasons, but the main reason is it's mainly about who we are as a company. So eBay's purpose is essentially to empower people and create economic opportunity for all. So everything we do internally, excuse me, whether it's early definition of a project upstream with a product manager, figuring out how accessibility is incorporated during design to help with that design to engineer conversation, to any tooling that we have in place for our developers, to any training and education and manual testing that we have available for our testers. So any new hire sessions that we have, it's important to get in front of our team so we understand that it's important and everything rolls up to and points at, hey, this is part of our purpose. And then a step further internally, we have some tenets that we live by, what we consider our part of our DNA. And two of those really stand out here. And one is be for everyone. And the second one is be fearlessly inclusive. Now, inclusive, the word can take on many forms at a lot of companies, and eBay is no different. But when we talk about that in the context of our work as a small team, centralized team focused on accessibility, all the product teams take that work seriously as well. But we talk about digital accessibility when we talk about inclusiveness. So it aligns quite nicely to our company purpose. So it's just something that's instilled in us at a very early and often in our eBay career. So it's not always an easy thing to implement day to day, but it's nice having that as part of your corporate culture and part of your company's purpose.
Absolutely. And just in terms of purpose, being for everyone, being fiercely inclusive, how do you take your staff on that inclusion journey?
Yeah, there's a number of ways we do it. I'd say the most impactful way that we try to do this, it's been a little bit more challenging the last few years, but we'd like to put the customer in the center of every decision that we make, whether it's, I mean, outside of accessibility, there's a lot of, you can imagine a lot of different teams at eBay, but I think the most impactful way is to make sure we're actually hearing from the people that are using our product, that are experiencing what we see day in and day out, or what we try to build day in and day out. We can become a little consumed with it, so to speak. A lot of gotcha moments or aha moments can be had when simply observing people using your product. So we try to bring people in for like brown bag sessions, we call them, or lunch and learns, where anybody can really attend. We tend to focus on design and engineers because they're the ones designing and building the thing that we put on screens in front of people. But we like to invite people in to share their lived experience. Let them tell us. And it doesn't always have to be just about eBay. In fact, we invite people in to tell us about your day-to-day. How do you go about getting transportation? How do you check your mail? How do you respond to email? It doesn't have to just be eBay messages or anything specific. But more often than not, it segues into how they use the product. And that seems to resonate very well with our teams. So it's not just Mark and his team constantly reiterating like, hey, we have to keep this stuff in mind, working on process improvements, things like that. So that's a big way.
No, brilliant, Mark. And as you scan the tech horizon, give us a little flavor of what might be coming down the track, and what might that mean for a director of accessibility?
Yeah. Well, some things that come to mind, if we're talking a bit of this, the word innovation's in the title for this particular session. So innovation can be a bit loaded term in the tech space, I get that. But when we talk about the types of features and services that we put in front of people, we tend to focus as a team, we tend to focus on building that foundation. So having a solid foundation in place can allow us to account for accessibility when new projects or new concepts are created. I don't know how to word this quite simply, but if if we didn't have that found internally, we have a bunch of resources and documentation available for teams to reference. Some of that stuff is also open source. So if anybody listening or attending right now, you can go search for eBay mind patterns. It's just like mind, M-I-N-D. There's also open source code snippets that map to very common web components or reused components. But when new things come about, something I just reminded me, last week, I believe, was Comic-Con in New York. I didn't get to attend, but some of my teammates did. And we've been working internally, something that's been pretty popular the past years called live commerce. So having the ability to live stream an event and market or promote a given product. And we had some exclusive eBay Funko figures that were available. And we partnered with some folks that ran a live commerce event. Now, when we say live commerce, I'm holding my fingers up and like everybody can see me, but in the form of a mobile device. The interface that's presented to people is essentially like if we've all experienced some sort of live streaming event or video event, it's some hosts or a host talking about a particular product, demonstrating that product, maybe showing it on screen. But there's a lot of activity going on the screen. There's streaming comments, there's emojis to activate, there's the number of attendees, probably the ability to share the event. There's a bunch of interaction in a small space. But what a lot of people don't see is there's a whole admin interface. So how do we make sure that that admin interface is actually accessible as well? And in that admin interface, the people sort of managing the event can inject content within the live stream event itself. So the thing I'm describing suddenly will pop up on the bottom of the screen, and you're now enabled to bid on that item or buy that item. So from an accessibility perspective, we think about these things and how much motion is too much motion? Is it distracting? We have to make sure there's a way to disable that. We have to account for closed captioning, for example. Now, some of the devices may there's an evolution of AI that's been happening for a while now that in some cases, in the case of captioning, maybe now it's becoming easier. I won't say the quality is better necessarily, but sometimes it's becoming easier to have live audio caption. But yeah, so having that foundation in place helps us when teams like that come to us early on in the project and say, hey, we know we want to launch our minimum viable product. Even if it's beta, we understand there's going to be bugs in software and we got to work things out. What do we need to do in terms of accessibility, and what do we need to account for? And then we consult with those teams and we help them deliver a more accessible product. At the end of the day, all the things that I just discussed in this quick chat really boil down to us just making sure we're delivering a more usable, more inclusive user experience for all people. So.
Brilliant, and a really important comment there. It's so many organizations come and say to us, look, we've just rebuilt our website. How do we make it accessible?
Yeah, and it spans, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yeah,
I mean, global company, so it expands international websites and beyond just our native iOS and Android apps as well. So we're thinking beyond just the web space.
No, absolutely. But the example I was going to say is the answer is you should have come and talked about accessibility at the design stage 6 months ago. It would have been so much easier. And I think we've just got to get into that kind of mindset of the eBay mindset that actually you build it in at the design stage. The changes that are needed, the retro fittings that are needed are just minimal. And, we think about customers are customers, full stop, which is the purpose of Purple Tuesday. So thank you ever so much, Mark. Those of you, please send in your questions for Mark and for others as we go along. But I now want to introduce Sarah from SHL. Sarah, you recently did some neurodiversity research, which I played a very small part on because I was on a webinar absolutely about it, around how to improve the candidate experience of assessment for neurodiverse individuals. Can you tell us a little bit more about the findings and what does this mean in practice?
Absolutely, Mike. We're very proud of the research initiatives that we have undergone in the past few years, trying to get to those tangible insights that can drive best practice recommendations when assessing neurodivergent talent. Honestly, there's really a small body of research that's out there that we can lean on. And so SHL said, well, we need to go do the research so we can help advise others. And the research that we've recently completed really sought to extend what's out there and answer two questions to start. We wanted to really understand, how did individuals with neurodivergent conditions perform on assessments, and how did they react or experience the assessments? And so within the research base, we tried to incorporate different assessment types, so cognitive, personality, judgment, and also different formats, so gamified assessment, text-based assessment, picture-based assessment. And our findings that I can tell you about today really are in two different areas. The first would be our test-specific findings, and I think that this is really a lot of our customers ask about this specifically around, can I use cognitive with this population, or is judgment not a great idea to use for these groups of individuals? And then I can share some broader findings as well. So let's start with cognitive ability, because I think this is one of the tests that we get the most questions on. In our initial studies, compared to those that did not disclose a disability, individuals that self-disclosed with autism or other neurodivergent conditions actually performed similarly and took comparable amounts of time to complete cognitive tests as those that didn't disclose those conditions. Additionally, they also disclosed favorable reactions to completing the cognitive assessments, and I can share that that is not normal. We typically have in the broader population much more muted reaction to cognitive assessments because people don't typically like to complete them. So the practical finding coming out of that set of research is that cognitive ability may actually be a promising option when assessing neurodivergent talent. And as we start to look at personality or more behaviorally based assessment, we do see neurodivergent talent is likely to have more of that spiky profile with areas of strength and challenge. So in order to ensure that employers aren't inadvertently screening out neurodivergent talent who may be fully capable of succeeding in role, we would recommend employers ensure that the skills and abilities that they're assessing and they're choosing to put forth in their selection process are actually required for success in role. So in other words, don't over-specify a number of competencies if they aren't truly required. And hiring managers, we would challenge you to ask yourself, could somebody be successful if they demonstrated some, but not all of the competencies in the identified profile? As it relates to those assessment-specific findings, I should note that we saw both commonality and variance with regard to the strengths and challenges displayed across the various neurodivergent conditions. The takeaway being, it's really critically important to study neurodivergent conditions separately and not to generalize specific findings to all neurodivergent talent. And that can be a challenge when conducting research because we have small sample sizes to begin with if we're just looking at the neurodivergent talent pool. And then as we separate into the singular neurodivergent conditions, your sample size gets smaller still. Even though it's challenging, we must try to continue to do so. As we kind of look at the bigger picture findings, the takeaways from the program of research that we have been pulling together, I would say first, a one-size-fits-all approach will not apply, right? So employers that are looking to make accommodations for candidates that are passing through their selection process, you can't assume that what you did for candidate A that disclosed autism to you will be the same accommodation that's going to work for candidate B disclosing autism. While your content and your platform should be as consistent as possible, employers really need to take that individualized approach to understanding how does the test taking experience affect each individual and how could it be modified so that the candidates can demonstrate their abilities to you. We'd also urge employers to recommend practice tests to their candidates. And honestly, this is for all candidates, not just those with neurodivergent conditions. Practice tests impact performance and candidates do better when they've seen the test beforehand. So we would urge all employers to say, go take a practice test, and that should help those with neurodivergent conditions identify What accommodations should they be asking for? What's going to help them do their best on the assessment? Disclosure is a big finding as well. So really important. We found that participants in our research were not always willing to disclose a neurodivergent condition and request accommodation. And this is in our research, which would be considered low stakes. So we'd really expect that finding to be exaggerated in a high stakes setting, such as for selection. Practical finding on this one is really twofold. We've got, from the employer perspective, you've got to make sure you're encouraging candidates to feel comfortable disclosing. You can do that by using positive language, explaining the benefits of requesting accommodation, and honestly making it easy for them to do so. Is there an email? Is there a phone number? Is it the recruiter? Does your candidate pool know how to request an accommodation should they need one? The easier you make that for them, you're removing an obstacle to asking for that accommodation. The second takeaway as it relates to disclosure is really for the test providers like SHL. Ultimately, we need to be aiming to create assessments that are accessible and inclusive for all to remove the burden of disclosure. Let's just take the hurdle away and not put it on that neurodivergent talent pool. Obviously, that's why we're investing in all of this research. We want to know how can we best create those inclusive and accessible assessments to remove that burden. And I think finally, if I were to wrap up with one last practical recommendation, it would be there's huge value in gathering feedback directly from your neurodivergent candidates. We found that some of the suggestions were actually really small changes that could make a big difference to the inclusivity of the test. Something like just more inclusive word choice, adding more clear instructions so they knew what was coming next, or allowing for breaks between assessment components. Really, again, small changes that if you ask the candidate pool, you might find really easy ways to build a better candidate experience.
Thank you, Sarah. And what I take away from that is we all know that the best businesses reflect in their workforce their consumer base, and therefore there's a symbiotic relationship that if you get it right for customers who are on the neurodiverse spectrum, and then actually you can get it right for workforce as well. And there's some really great insights there. And later on, we'll be talking specifically about, in another session, about hidden impairments and what you were saying around the things that you can do to encourage disclosure. Because the moment you can just encourage disclosure and people disclose, then you can put the reasonable adjustments in place. Individuals are happier, and in the nicest sense, the organization is more productive. And I think the other takeaway for me from what you've just said, Sarah, is that in terms of the disabled customer, a one-size-fits-all approach simply doesn't work. And people know that's quite lazy. We actually, the answer is, my name's Mike and I'm a customer who happens to have a disability. And that is the approach that all organizations need to think about in terms of accessibility. No longer are we a tick box exercise. No longer are we prepared to have a suboptimal kind of customer experience, because with online and everything else, it's about choice. And if you don't feel valued as a customer, you'll go elsewhere. And I think in the global kind of space we are at the moment, every organization needs to do what they can to kind of attract and retain customers. And Sarah, one thing I would say is if you get an opportunity, or if you could put in the chat box a link to the webinar or your work, because I'm sure what you've done will be of wider interest. If not, we can circulate afterwards as well. So thank you ever so much. And I'm now going to move on to Raghunath. It's brilliant to see you again. And I just wonder whether you could talk us through some of the tech innovations that Standard Chartered are implementing to improve the digital experience for disabled people.
Good to see you, Mike. It's been always pleasure having a chat with you. Yes, so at Standard Chartered, it's been I must say, it's been an awesome journey, especially the last 2.5 to 3 years specifically. Now, as a whole, we being a global bank, for us, we have always looked at ways how can we serve our customers who are differently abled, who come to us with the different challenges. We have used various modes and means. Like, for example, we have a team of sign language interpreters whom we have hired, and their job is both internally and externally. They work with the clients, and we have also looked at a whole office designed for people with visual impairment. Everything from a coffee machine to the lift to the door to everything where you have the braille and all that. But over a period of time, especially with the advent of the pandemic, what we realized is a few challenges. Like, one of the things we realized was, now, just as an example with the braille, not everybody knows braille, and not everybody were coming to office. Everybody moved digital. So with the enabling of digital, like just imagine this call, right? All of us are here, and if I had a colleague who was visually impaired, or my relationship manager was speaking to a client on a digital channel who was visually impaired or who was hearing impaired, how would we communicate with them? So that was the light bulb moment for us, that we got to start looking internally first, and then build a momentum, build a culture, start with the DNA, and how can we take it further? So what we did was, we started with the simple things. First, we started internally, and then we took it externally. We started with the very simple things, like the video sessions or the video tools like the MS Teams, the Zooms, or we were using Blue Jeans. We turned on closed captioning. And our teams always thought, oh, why do we need closed captioning? And, let's not do it. How many people use it? We said, no, it's an absolute necessity. I want closed captioning. Full stop, right? So we started with that, and that made a huge difference. And then we started, enabling speech to text, text to speech. We actually started looking at simple things, which our people could use, like the screen magnifiers, the noise suppressions, the eye control tools, and visual and color contrast tools, and stuff like that. Once we made it available to our staff as an employees, and they started using it, they said, wow, we love this. And we didn't invest a big time. We start asking and making it enabling on basic things like the operating system, like Mark touched upon, Android, iOS, Windows, those kind of things, which is already there, and the browsers. And once these basic, the infrastructure is made available, and everybody started coming on that. And what we also, we as a bank, we are heavily invested in, just yesterday, 10/10 was a mental health day. So we are heavily invested in mental well-being of our staff. And that came into a forefront. So we started looking at not just only the permanent disabilities, we started looking at what is called as situational disabilities. So we had colleagues, because we operate in like 70 odd markets across the globe. So we had colleagues wherein a small room where probably, for me in Singapore, I have a fantastic bandwidth. I have my son is one room, my daughter is one room. I have a big room for myself here. I can operate, but then there were places where people were using a one single mobile, a 4G connection for the entire family to be connected on a digital platform. So we started working with them, and then we started addressing situations like even the mental illness and the dyslexia people, myopia, and even the simplest of the so-called disabilities or differently abled people, and people who met with accident. I have stories where some of our colleagues said, you know what, I met with an accident, I couldn't use my hand for 2 months, but doesn't matter, because I could use speech to text, text to speech. and I'm perfectly functional. I don't need to work on my keyboard. I don't need to work on my, I don't need to go and raise a special device, which takes 6 months to get approved. No, all that problems, right? So that's how we started. And what we did was we wanted to take this, like, I know Mark also touched upon a little bit more further. We don't have a team, even though I drive that with a few people and with our board support. We don't have a dedicated team. But what we did was we made this into the design process. So now any product which goes through a major upgrade, or a certain level of an upgrade, or a new product, it's a part of the design principles. It's part of the architecture principles. Before that can get approved, we ask them certain questions, and we just focus on very basic things about the W3C principles. Of the W3C is a Bible by itself. So instead of giving them the, hey, go and do the entire Bible, we have made it concise. Like, we have 8 principles that we go and apply, and that covers like from the visual to hearing to mental to learning disorders and all that. Yeah. So people have to answer them. People have to, even if they can't implement, we are creating a culture shift here. So they would say, yeah, I can't do this now. Maybe in my my release 2, my release 3, my release 4, right? They would come in, and we have included this in our RFPs. So every RFP now we ask these questions. Apart, and not just about of course we have the diversity as a part of that, but beyond diversity, even the accessibility is a part of the RFP. So vendors are supportive, and to the best of my knowledge, most of the vendors out there who are quite medium-sized onwards, they actually have these features available. It's just a matter for the clients to ask them, and they're like very supportive. They're like, especially since we have made it available in the core infrastructure, that's operating system and the browser. So they're there. So from there, we are taking to the clients. So we have actually rolled out in India as a test market for now, a complete banking product for the visually impaired and as well as the hearing impaired clients, and that's going well. And Taiwan also, we have rolled out the same thing. That's been quite a huge success, and then we plan to do that. And we also launching new digital banks. So when we develop these new digital banks, the accessibility features are a part of the entire requirement. And so that's how we are going. It's a long journey. We are not at there, but then we are starting. Just to finish, what we also done is, one of the things that I realized was we have to catch at the day when we start recruitment. So we started training our recruiters and line managers. When you start looking for a candidate, do not discount people with any differently able, or do not discount people with disabilities. So here are the tools available. So please go out in the market. So now they go out specifically in the market, they look for people, and we have very, very successful stories. In fact, tomorrow internally, I'm even running a session wherein I'm showcasing some of our candidates who we have hired, so that the others can get motivated. So yeah, we're trying to attack this from various angles, but it's a journey because of the complexity, because of the markets that we operate in, and the way we have structured.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. And for someone who has worked in the disability world for 20 years, some of the things that you have said, Mark said, Sarah said, in terms of purpose and design, this generation of disabled people will expect. I will tell you that 10 years ago, we would not have had this webinar, we would not have had this conversation. Accessibility was not built in terms of design, in terms of purpose, in terms of channels for employees as well as customers. So we have come a long way. And like we said, we're on that journey. We're all on that journey. My challenge is we need to speed up, but the technology is there, but the tech is only as good as the things that surround it as well, that also need to be put in place. It's not the silver bullet in itself. So, but it's wonderful just to hear from 3 organizations who have got a history of accessibility, and a relationship with us in Purple Tuesday. But I always get really excited when we bring on board new organisations who maybe are starting their journey, but have made that commitment. And I'm absolutely delighted that this year for Purple Tuesday, GiffGaff are part of us and with us, and delighted to have you, Abby. And just wanted to ask you really, what steps are you taking to support your disabled customers with communicating with your organisation?
I think I probably have to start by just saying I've taken so many notes based on everything so far. So, you know, partnering with you folks is already paying back. We are, as you said, we're very much at our infancy. We are nowhere near as mature, I think, as the eBays and the Standard Banks or Standard Chartered Banks here. But I think what's really fascinating is what you said about technology not being the silver bullet, and how you need to partner that with knowledge as well. And, you know, there's more that goes around that. So one of the ways that we have started to look at, okay, well, what can we do to help our GiffGaff members who have a disability? And we started to use a keyword screening tool on our help cases, which it's so unbelievably basic, but essentially what that enables us to do, we get around 50,000 cases that come into our frontline agent teams every single month. And it means that we can look for different phrases or, you know, combinations of phrases that are mentioned in those cases and prioritize the help that those members get. So that I think there's a 75% average case handling time reduction for those cases. We can also then look at the quality of help that's received. We can do more training with our teams. We can make sure, okay, are we making the right reasonable adjustments for those members? But what's really important, I think, is for us to understand the landscape and what we don't know. And so working with you folks, where I think we are 2 weeks away from our frontline training, which I'm very excited about. We're doing disability awareness with our teams, but we've also extended that out beyond our frontline team. So we're also looking to include, we have a member panel. So I think similar to what Mark was describing at eBay, like, you know, the best products and services are created with the people using it. We've got around 10,000 members who are part of that panel. But that panel doesn't include people with disabilities. And we need to, you know, if we want to embed better products and services for members of that community, we need to work with members of that community. So I think that disability awareness training, but equally just considering how we conduct those research sessions. I think from the pandemic, it's been brilliant being able to run the sessions on Zoom with folks so that, you know, you can have that conversation. It doesn't have to be people in the office using your, you know, we've got different test labs, which are, I'm going to not lie, they're empty at the moment because we're running many more sessions online. But we do need to think about ways that we can engage more of more of our community, more of our members, to help challenge us to make our products and services better.
Brilliant. And Abby, on behalf of Purple Tuesday, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're on board. And I hope events like this can kind of speed up your kind of knowledge, your expertise, your engagement and your involvement. And I'll give you a 10-second warning. We're just about now to talk to Isaac, and if I would get another pen, because you might, and another bit of paper. You absolutely might need it in the next 10 minutes. And can I introduce everyone to Isaac, who wears more hats than anyone I know, I think. And today he is here as a Purple Tuesday disabled customer ambassador. And it's really, really important to say this. When we launched 5 years ago, Purple Tuesday, I launched it to a conference of about 300 people. And there were 2 people who put their hand up at the end, both who were disabled, and said, whatever happens, Mike, please do not make Purple Tuesday about a one-day celebration where all businesses just kind of roll out accessibility and then the following day it goes back to how it was. And I have remembered that, and it's etched in my mind. And Isaac, with about 15 other disabled customer ambassadors, are absolutely key to ensuring lived experience, sharing it with organisations like GiffGaff and eBay and SHL and Standard Chartered and everyone else in between across the globe. So your changes and accessibility are rooted in real lived experience. And Isaac, in your day job, you're also a videographer. And
Yes.
I know it because I've been to your house and you
Yes.
do it all. You do all the editing with your feet. Are there specific technologies and innovations that enable you to do your job, really?
Well, thanks for having me today to speak. And also, I just want to say thank you to all of the organizations on this part of the webinar and what you're doing for the disability community and what real change is making for people's lives and their customer experiences. So yes, I am a videographer. I've done that for the past 10 years, and it's changed over time of how I have done it from the beginning to now. I started off on doing, after I left school, I wanted to become a YouTube vlogger where I would film my adventures of someone with a disability, and then I would put them up onto YouTube. And for me to do that, I had to rely on friends and family willing to film me. And then I then would independently with my feet, as I'm lying down here, this is how I use the computer, edit those videos and then put them up online. And at first it was a bit difficult, especially because I wanted like a DSLR camera, which has got loads of fiddly buttons and things, and explaining that to each and every person would have proved very difficult. So I ended up going with the small action camera GoPro, which is 2 easy buttons that I could explain to people. But as they have improved, it now has a voice activated feature, which means I can now turn on the camera once it's been turned on once by someone, and then I can tell it to record, stop recording, and it gives me that flexibility. One time, I could give you an example. I've used that recently. So I'm also a president of an organization called Wheels and Wheelchairs, and that's roller skaters pushing wheelchair users around London. And we took part in the Berlin Marathon, skate marathon, and I put the GoPro on my chest, and I was able to turn on and off the camera as we were skating and to capture it like from my view skating through this marathon. So that was great to be able to do that. There's also some new technologies that I've not personally used, but it's making editing much easier for people. And there's a website called Descript, and that's turns your video into text. So it'll capture all the audio, AI will figure out what's been said, and then it turns it into text. And then you can edit the text, which will then edit the video. So it's not so difficult now. Like I use a very complicated software, which has taken me 5-6 years to learn, but this is now allowing people to have that access to be able to edit videos. We also have a really good website called Canva, which allows you to create videos, and you can piece things together very easily now. And even on mobile phones, you have apps like KineMaster, CapCut, I think it's another one, which you can edit on the go. Basically, you don't need really expensive computers anymore. You can just do it from your phone and still create amazing videos.
Yeah, fantastic. And in many ways, in talking about technology and specifically around social media, what do you think has changed over the years that has enabled disabled people to engage?
I think the major thing is, and it's been spoken about today, is about closed captions and how most of these websites like YouTube, Facebook and Instagram have, it recognizes what's being said and you can turn them on. I'm not saying they are perfect, and it is best if you are able to edit them so it is more available for people, but it's stop the barrier of having to type out every single word. At least you have a starting point. But also, over time, even as a disability advocate, I've been learning the importance of captions. That I've invested in a website called rev.com, and that's where you can send your videos to professional closed caption transcribers who will then transcribe your work, and then you can then download the file and be able to upload it to whatever platform that you want to, and then you've made your videos more accessible, and it's not so expensive as well. It's worth the money, basically. And then with social media platforms, you've also got the alt text and the screen reader, so it people who are visually impaired, they'll read what the captions of the video are, and it's also based on people to explain what's in the video, so it's making it accessible, so videos are more accessible for everybody.
So there is a challenge for everyone listening today, either live and then on demand, that all videos should be captioned, all videos should have subtitles. It is easy to do. It is quick. We have done 3 videos this week, and it's been back in an hour and 10 minutes, all correct, and it costs pennies. And one of the things about customers is that originally it was maybe for hard of hearing deaf people, but actually as more and more staff work in open plan offices and travel on public transport, it is the way in which they consume information. So it becomes kind of much more normalized. So, by doing and investing, it's an investment, not a cost. And by doing it, actually you open up the market in many ways. And just talking of social media, Smartbots, who were on the previous session, they create a voice for people who don't speak. And their grid technology has enabled young disabled people for the first time to access social media. And in this day and age, what a wonderful thing to be able to do. Sometimes when I look at my phone, I'm not so sure, but to have the opportunity to be able to is really liberating, and what we should be doing in 2022. And I'll do the plug for him just in case he doesn't, but Isaac is one of the most influential social influencers, an absolute powerhouse. Puts me to shame really in terms of numbers of likes, but he's really, really amplifying the message about why issues like Purple Tuesday is so important to the disabled community, and just why organizations like you should be engaging with it. Tell us your secret, please. How do you do it? Let us know.
So, someone actually asked me this the other day, and I quickly said, "Oh, it's just because I'm the best." But no, for me, I think the way that I've been able to engage people and start a conversation is by sharing a story, an honest story, telling people about my lived experience, and doing it in a way that it can be relatable. I talk very highly about mental health. I talk about access issues, and these are things that a lot of people can relate to. And I incorporate that in, making things more inclusive. And, I think stories are the things which we can really learn from, and we can educate. And also, I'm not perfect. I don't know a lot. And I like to tell people that I'm also on this journey of learning. And from that learning, I'm able to educate others. So, it's a win-win for everybody that I'm able to have this platform, amplify others, and learn on the way, and be able to connect with people like yourself, Mike, and get opportunities to speak to wide audiences globally.
Absolutely. And it is the modern day world of how we are going to change the disability conversation, and we need to take allies with us on that journey. So if you don't follow Isaac, my suggestion is that you do, and just see how important and how powerful opening up markets to disabled customers. And I think one of the things that comes out today is small changes again can have a huge and can make a huge difference. I'm just going to ask Lauren, because I can't see from the screen. Have we got any questions that have come in, Lauren?
Yeah, we've had a couple that have come in. So we had one from when Abby was talking about GiffGaff's journey, just saying that you mentioned being at the infancy stage of your accessibility journey. So what are the key things that you're taking away from here today to kind of be implemented?
I'm not going to lie, I've written so many notes. So there are quite a few. I think, so we are implementing the frontline training for our teams. We've also got members of our pioneers team and also our propositions and revenue team in there, so that we can start to really think about how do we embed that mindset shift, if you like, within what we're creating from the start. I have taken note of the 8 principles that were mentioned, so I'm really looking forward to see when they get posted. And I thought there was another thing I think Mark mentioned, which was just around I've forgotten the name of it, but the code base that you had, which can be implemented with commonly used web components. So I'm going to come straight off this call, write up all my notes and share them with our teams to get things moving. So hopefully I'll come back in a year and we'd have done quite a lot more.
Fantastic. And you said there was another question, Lauren, I think.
Yeah, so we had another one aimed at Mark as well from eBay, and just saying that obviously accessibility and disability is really important to your organisation, and they're wondering what your plans are over the next couple of years to attract more disabled entrepreneurs to sell on the platform.
Yeah, that's a that's a pretty loaded question. I'll just be very transparent. We do currently have some sellers that either advocate for people with disabilities in their particular community, or maybe wounded vets or other groups throughout the world. We also have people with disabilities that actually run their own business and use it as the source of income, because we know there's a high percent of unemployment in the community. I don't have any specific plans right now for the next few years. Right now, we're really focused more on making sure that if your question specifically around entrepreneurs and smaller sellers, or maybe individual sellers, we really want to focus on the selling flow and getting your store created or getting your inventory on the site as easy as possible. So it might sound dead simple and obvious, but we want to start there to make sure that things are in place before we go out and maybe I don't know, over publicize the great opportunity that eBay does offer. So yeah, we think it's in an okay position now, but we recognize, I mean, I mentioned this earlier too, it's a website, that's software, there's going to be issues. So, and we're constantly making updates, and features get removed and get added, and we have to make sure that stuff maintains its certain level of accessibility before we go attract new business.
But the answer, Mark, isn't it, is you continue to make your tech accessible. It will then enable disabled entrepreneurs to flourish on your sites. You can see from the story of Isaac in terms of videography, he is enabled to do his job even better than he does today, and better than he did yesterday, for example. So it's about creating that accessible environment to enable individuals who may or may not have a disability to flourish. And I'm going to abuse my position as host, because I want to ask a question. And I'm going to ask it to Raghunath and then Mark. But others, Sarah and Abby, if you want to respond, absolutely. Look, this is about tech trends. So tell us tell us one thing. Where do you think we are going to be in terms of tech trends in 5 years? Tell us one thing you think might emerge that we may not have seen previously, that we can then think in terms of accessibility. Raghunath.
I think, I mean, for sure, one thing that's going to change is accessibility is not going to be just good to have. It's going to be a must to have. It's going to be a mainstream. That's for sure, without doubt. Yeah, and things like what you and Isaac spoke about, the closed captioning and all that is going to be absolutely, it's just going to be mainstream. Yeah. The other bit, with the advent of AI, which Mark also touched upon a bit when he spoke earlier, with the advent of AI coming in, accessibility is, and the NL, neuro-linguistic, and all that embedded into the whole thing, accessibility is going to be part of the profiling of the customers, or profiling of the people. So it's no more that, yeah, I'm Raghunath, I have a hearing, disability, so then I go and ask for it and disable. No, I think it's going to be a part of the profiling, because we're going to get so deep into the knowing our people, knowing our customers, knowing our staff, that it's going to be a part of the day I join let's say, an organization, the day I join the Standard Chartered Bank, and 3 years from now, here is your laptop, here is your equipment, here is your software set up for you to work the way you want to work. So I think it's going to be that, meaning that it's going to be part of the whole journey. The AI and the neuro-linguistic and this accessibility is where it's going to be coming together. It's the way I see it.
Brilliant, thank you. And Mark?
Yeah, the things that come to mind immediately when I'm asked a question like that, I kind of blend the digital accessibility space and the physical space, even though I spend 100% of my time in digital accessibility. But I obviously, of course, I try to think beyond that. I don't know, the cool things like self-driving cars and the ability to access areas of the world or your community that you maybe weren't able to independently do as much of before really kind of excites me. I'm hopeful that employment practices will improve over time, and we'll have a much more diverse employment, makeup across companies. So it's not just, it doesn't have to be this big push. I get that it has to be now, and at least in recent years, like, hey, we should have a more diverse workforce. That just seems obvious, but that's the people like us, maybe not current leaders. So hopefully that improves in the next few years, maybe 5 to 10 years. I mean, hopefully it is improving in general. Something else that I don't know how it presents itself, but wearable tech's always something that's kind of interested me. Now, I'm not just talking like smartwatches and stuff, but I'm like clothing and I don't know, any technology around something that gets a little bit more personal and closer to the person. Now, then that starts to introduce privacy concerns and what have you. But I don't know, it's a bit of a ramble. I'm kind of scattered because there's a lot of directions you could go with, like what might things look like in this space in a few years, and I'm just excited to be part of it.
No, and thank you very much. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, everyone, leave the last word to Isaac today, and just a message from you, Isaac, about why Purple Tuesday is so important to disabled people.
Well, like I said earlier, it's life-changing for people like myself to be able to be a customer. I think that should be something that everyone should be able to access and be able to go to, and it's just allowing us to be human, like everybody else.
Brilliant. I couldn't have put it any better. So I just want to thank Mark, Sarah, Raghunath, Abby, and Isaac for being involved in a hugely insightful session today. Thank you ever so much. And for those of you who can, in half an hour, we have a Q&A. Have a cuppa with myself and Charlene. You can ask us anything you like, and we will attempt to answer it, preferably something to do with Purple Tuesday, given the topic today. And then at 4 till 5 today, UK time, how to support customers with hidden disabilities, and 7 to 8 p.m. later today, disability inclusive marketing and communications. So thank you all for watching, and hope to catch you later today at some point. Thank you very much.